This week, we're moving to wide receiver. We're moving from last draft pick up to the most recent, and we'll bundle picks as the position warrants. But this week, we're talking about the wide receiver position. And the guy drafted in the 6th round pick, 191 overall, out of Michigan State, Jalen Nailor. I don't even know her.
I just feel like I can be a dynamic playmaker for him. Just trying to come in, just make plays whenever the team needs me. Just do whatever the coach asks me, whatever I got to do. I'm gonna do it to 110%. This weekend's been kind of long, but once I got that call, everything changed, man. It was just nothing but happiness and cheers going around. Just me and my family out here right now. And that's what I'm just spending my time with, spending this day with. I feel amazing right now. Definitely the best I've ever felt my whole life.
He's pretty fired up, isn't he?
He's fired up. He's confident. And look, I would much rather have a long shot guy with all the confidence in the world talk about making the team than a guy's like, well, yeah, I'm probably not going to make it. I'm a 6th round pick and I'm pretty inconsistent. So we'll just see what happens. Like, no guy's ever going to say that, right? Naylor was a guy that you, me, and Chris Gates, who is our co-host on Vikings Report Rewind, we're all kind of excited about. What were you excited about? What do you think he can do as a member of the Minnesota Vikings?
I think he was kind of dropped down in the draft ranks because it was such a talented and large draft group with the wide receivers, Ted. There are some flaws in his game and some things that they're going to have to work on, but I think they're things that are technique things that Keenan McCardell can teach him and show him. But you got to love the big playability from Jalen Naylor. 2020, he led the Big Ten, which is no slouch conference. We know about that, in average yards per catch with, I think, 18 or 19. In 2020, he led the Big Ten in that, and he has a propensity for getting open.
And Michigan State quarterbacks are not barn burners by any stretch of the imagination. If you watch the Big Ten, you're not going to consider Michigan State currently the cradle of quarterbacks. You'll consider it the cradle of $100 million coaches because Mel Tucker is, but not the cradle of quarterbacks. So I'm sorry, I just had to throw that in there. Go ahead and continue.
He's got this, what they call like blind spot awareness, something like Chris Carter had a lot of. And that's knowing where the defender is going to be, not only defenders that are covering you, but defenders in the whole secondary, having a good feel without actually seeing them, knowing them, feeling where they're going to tackle you from angles or try to cover you. That's how he gets open so much. He's a great open field player. He's a guy you want to get the ball in his hands. That's why, hence the high average in receiving. He kind of has a sense to know how defenders are going to play him, and he uses that to his advantage. And he's got a smaller size, and if he doesn't hit the Laquan Treadwell, get caught on the line with the press coverage, then he's going to have a good shot. He's got to learn how to be a little bit more physical there.
That ability you were talking about in the flying world, we call that air sense, and kind of having a 3-dimensional mental picture of what was going on around you and your ability to interpret where everything was, where you were in relation to everything else, and how to react accordingly. And I'll tell you, air sense is something, in my experience, you either had or you didn't. Any pilot can grab the sticks and fly from point A to point B. It's that air sense that separates, in my opinion, a pilot from a really good pilot. And if this kid has that, not everybody does.
That's one of the things you can't teach, is that they call it blind spot awareness. They got, without getting too heavy into the oily hips and the mechanical congruency, we don't like all that, but that's a good term for he knows where to set himself in the receiving zones, and he knows where the defender's going to be. So he has the ability, and he's so deceptively fast. That's how he got a lot of long receptions. He's the master of the long reception at Michigan State. Going back to that game last year against Rutgers, 221 yards on 5 receptions, 3 touchdowns.
If you haven't seen those highlights, go check them out. It's insane.
We got him here. We're going to roll him.
All righty.
He had a 65-yard touchdown, another 65-yard touchdown, and I think a 62-yard touchdown. He had a 44-yard catch average in that game. I know it was Rutgers, and I know it's college, but that guy has a knack for the big play, Ted. Go back to the beginning at the great Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas, the powerhouse high school he went to. He went to Bishop Gorman 15-0, 15-0, 13-2. He was 43-2. In Bishop Gorman, what did they pump out? Ronnie Stanley, offensive tackle for the Ravens, running back. Cowboys used to have back 10 years ago. DeMarco Murray.
Okay.
Another Bishop Gorman High School player, just a powerhouse high school, so he's really highly recruited coming out of there. When he got to Michigan State, part of his problem is the durability. That's why he fell to the 6th round.
So if he's got this air sense or this situational awareness, and he's got this big playability, then why is he still around in the 6th round?
Because his durability is a factor. He never played a full season at Michigan State. He played 26 games out of a possible 46 there that he could have played.
Wow.
In 26 games, he had 86 catches, 1,454 yards, and 12 touchdowns. But in 4 seasons, you got to play more than 26 games. It didn't just happen his freshman or sophomore year. The injury thing has plagued him every season. And after 4 seasons, the scouts and the GMs look at you as being a problem, an injury problem. And that dropped him down. Also, contested catches. Not necessarily dropped passes, more catching the ball in contested areas and having the defender knock it out of his hands. He has to work on that because you got to, in the NFL, you got to get the contested ones.
Yeah.
You can't just get the wide open catches.
You talk about big playability and you talk about kind of injuries limiting what could have been a bigger potential and maybe a higher draft slot. And I'm going to throw a name out that immediately came to mind when you said those two things. Rondale Moore, the kid from Purdue who's now with the Arizona Cardinals.
Right.
Do you see a similarity in those two players? And do you think if he can stay healthy, he can become like a Rondale Moore type guy who had a heck of a rookie season with the Arizona Cardinals?
He's definitely got the speed for it. He ran a 4.37, and then at his pro day, I think he ran a 4.5. So there's kind of questions about his speed. His nickname his whole life has been Speedy Naylor, Ted.
That's what she said.
That's what she said.
Speedy Naylor. It takes you back to the 80s a little bit, don't it? I don't think he's quite as elusive and shifty as Rondale. Rondale Moore has like some Percy Harvin. He's not Percy Harvin, but he has a little bit of that shake and bake.
Okay.
The thing you're betting on with Naylor is that some of the drop passes, catching contested passes, his durability and things like that, a lot of his problems, I think, can be fixed by somebody like Keenan McCardell. If you get by all that, one of the best 10 steals in the draft. He has the ability to be a starting wide receiver on your team.
You mentioned Keenan McCardell, and it came out after the draft that when the 6th round rolled around, Keenan McCardell was, quote, standing on the table for this guy, Jalen Naylor. I was just looking up Rondale Moore's rookie season stats. Last year, he had 54 catches, 435 yards, and 1 touchdown, which was that 77-yarder against the Vikings where he was 25 yards. He was –
who's covering him? Who the hell is covering him?
At their own 23. Murray reverses. Murray looks long. He's got a receiver. Moore with a blocker. Rondale Moore, touchdown, Arizona.
So you take that measuring stick, I guess, for lack of a better word, and let's transfer that now over to the Minnesota Vikings. There are some traits that I think are hard to fix coming from college to the NFL. I think quarterback accuracy is something, if a guy has a poor completion percentage in college as a quarterback, it's not going to improve in the NFL because the windows to complete a throw are so much smaller. If a guy has drops as a wide receiver, it feels like that is something that is very difficult to correct. Do you think that is something that can be corrected?
I think it is if you're gun shy. If you're like, got it up here, it's a mental thing. It's kind of a bitch. Mm-hmm. But if you watch Naylor, all of his drops, Ted, were because he's letting the ball get to his pads. He wasn't snatching the ball. And I know McCardell's watching the same thing going, teach him how to use his hands, and he's going to be a badass. It's like a quarterback trying to become more accurate in the pros. Accuracy and drop passes are kind of hand in hand with learning, but I think there are some fundamentals that Keenan McCardell can teach him to make him have better hands. And his hands aren't terrible. They're not terrible. He still catches passes, but like I said, you got to catch the passes in traffic.
Yeah.
Those are the ones in the NFL that count.
And on the other end of the spectrum, we talk about his Rondale Moore-like qualities. You talk about a speedy guy that drops a lot of passes. Troy Williamson immediately comes to mind.
Chester Taylor and Tony Richardson in the backfield. Tavares Jackson with time. Hooks it up deep. He's got a man wide open. And Williamson dropped it. Troy Williamson dropped it.
There's quite the mental image that are about as far opposite as you could get from the potential either way for this kid, it seems like.
I think he's going to work out because O'Connell wants to get this guy in the slot and have him run slants and just get him the ball.
So let's roll Jalen Naylor over to the rest of the active roster on the Minnesota Vikings.
Me and the other 54 we have?
You can't swing a dead cat without hitting a wide receiver on the Minnesota Vikings roster right now. Your top guys are presumed to be Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, and BC Johnson, whose season ended last year with a torn ACL in training camp. The other guys on the roster besides Naylor are Dan Chisena, Blake Prohl, Thomas Hennigan, Trista Jackson, and Myron Mitchell.
Isn't he a lawyer, Myron Mitchell? Wasn't he?
First of all, overall, I think the depth of this group this year is leaps and bounds better than it was this time last year, because you had guys like Dan Chisena and Chad Beebe as guys people were thinking could be really something. They're just not. Stop it with the Dan Chisenas of the world.
How many years has Dan Chisena been on the practice squad?
73, I think. He first came on board when the year Chuck Foreman was drafted, 1973.
Yeah, you're not worried about the guys after Thielen and Jefferson and KJ?
After Jefferson, Thielen, Osborne, Smith-Marset, no. BC Johnson, I'd like to see because he's coming off a torn ACL. But if the Vikings are only going with 5 receivers, I think they're going to go with 6.
Yeah.
So that means Chisena, Prohl, Hennigan, Jackson, Mitchell, and Naylor are fighting for potentially one spot. Now, say what you want about the Flotsam and Jetsam below BC Johnson, but Blake Prohl was a pretty decent special teams guy last year, and I would think either him or Chisena. I mean, Chisena saw the field a little bit last year as well. So realistically, you're probably looking at a 3-way battle between Naylor, Chisena, and Prohl for that 6th wide receiver spot.
What about Tommy Hennigan from Appalachian State? Come on, Ted.
He played like 472 games. The guy's 28. He's 28 or 29.
He played 66 games at Appalachian State. And I'm going, how the hell do you get 66 games under your belt?
He's a 14th year senior.
But he is the son of Joe and Lisa Hennigan. That's important.
Okay. I'm sure they're very proud of their son. Anybody who goes to college for that long ought to come out with a titled doctor at the end of it.
Well, a lot of people go to college for 7 years.
I know. They're called doctors.
Where do you see Naylor fitting in this roster depth, or do you see him fitting in the roster depth?
I think he is going to make the team.
Do you?
Yeah, and here we go. I guess it every year, then he ends up working at Togo's by October. He's working at AAA Tires or something. If Keenan McCardle's pounding the table for Naylor, is he pounding the table for Tommy Hennigan?
See, and that was a great point, and I was going to bring that up. I said, look, I was going to say the one thing I think Naylor has over everybody else, and I want to go back to that quote. McCardle was pounding the table for this kid. He sees something in this kid. And I'll tell you what, of all the dysfunction in the Minnesota Vikings coaching staff last year, it didn't come from Keenan McCardle.
No.
That cat can coach. That dude could play wide receiver. He was a great wide receiver when he played with the Jacksonville Jaguars back when they were in a complete tire fire. And if he sees talent in a kid, I would expect that he is going to get every opportunity to earn a roster spot. Whereas in years before, I wouldn't have thought that about rookies, 5th, 6th, 7th round rookies, unless there was an absolute dire need because of depth at that position. So you think he's going to make the roster?
I'm saying that Jalen Naylor makes the final roster.
I'm going to say yes, simply for the fact if Keenan McCardle believes in you, then I'm going to trust McCardle to think that there's something there and he's going to bring it out of this kid. So I'm going to say yes to the 53-man roster.